working on the properties of addition and multiplication. So properties are just kind of a fancy way of saying rules in math. So what we're going to be doing here are rules that you can use anytime you're doing addition and multiplication. Let's start out with the commutative property. So the commutative property just basically tells you that you can flip-flop the factors. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Flip-flop the factors. Let's go ahead and put an example in. For example, I know 3 times 5 equals 15. But I also know that 5 times 3 equals 15. So I know that I can just flip-flop my factors and it's going to be exactly the same. Now this works the exact same for addition as well. I know that 1 plus 4 equals 5 and 4 plus 1 equals 5. This is a super easy property that you already know how to use. We just had to put a name on it. So commutative property simply means to flip-flop those factors. For the next property we're going to do, it is the associative property. Now the associative property, we're going to call it changing the grouping order. So we're going to change the grouping order. And you've probably seen this in some other problems, but we're going to use parentheses. So for example, if I say 2 times 3 times 4, we know 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. And if I did 2 times 3 times 4, I know 3 times 4 is 12, times 2 is still 24. So by changing the grouping order, basically all I'm doing is saying the 2 and the 3 were together, but they kicked the 2 out and brought the 4 in. It's kind of like friend groups. 2 and 3 were friends, they kicked 2 out, now 3 and 4 are friends. It works the same for addition as well. 2 plus 3 plus 4. If I put my parentheses around the 2 and 3, I know that's 5 plus 4 is 9. But if I say 2 plus 3 plus 4, 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 2 is 9. So it really doesn't matter what numbers you multiply or add first, as long as it's all multiplication or all addition. This wouldn't work if I put multiplication and addition in the same problem, but because they're separate, it does work. Again, this is something you probably already knew. You just had to remember that associative property, it's all about who they associate with. To associate with someone means to stay next to someone. So you might associate with your friends at recess, but then one day you might not, and maybe your friends will associate with someone else. That's what associative property means. You are changing the grouping order. Now let's move on to the one that might be a little bit more complicated. A little bit more complicated. So for distributive property, we're going to break down and distribute a factor. Yes, you do need to write this in your notes. Break down and distribute a factor. So for example, let's say we have 9 times 3. I want to break down that 9. So I could break it into, let's say, 5 plus 4. So I broke down that 9. I'm saying 5 plus 4. Now I can't just add my times 3 on there because then I'd get a different answer. So I have to actually give my 3 to all the numbers. So let's rewrite that problem. We've got 5 plus 4, because that equals 9, times 3. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a 3 to the 5, and I'm going to give a 3 to the 4. So we're going to end up with 3 times 5 plus 3 times 4. We're going to do a couple more of those to make sure we understand. We could have a problem that says 6 plus 1 times times 2. This is normally what it's going to look like. You have to take that 2 and you're going to give a 2 to the 6. So it's going to be 2 times 6. And you're going to give a 2 to the 1. So it's going to be 2 times 1. You are distributing the number on the outside. Let's do another one. Let's say I've got 5 times 3 plus 4. I'm going to distribute that 5. I'm going to get a 5 to the 3, and I'm going to get 5 times 3. And I'm going to give a 5 to the 4, and I'm going to get 5 times 4. This is the distributive property. So you're going to break down the factors. So I could break the 9 down into 5 and 4, and then distribute. Distribute means to give. So if you have a teacher that's distributing pencils, she is giving out pencils. So you're going to distribute the number by itself to the other factors in the parentheses. I know that one could get a little confusing, but we're going to take time and do lots of practice with it. And for the last two, they're so easy, we have them together. The identity property and the zero property. So identity property just means anything times 1 equals itself. So 4 times 1 is 1. It keeps its identity. Your identity is who you are. So if we multiply anything by 1, it stays the same. Now the zero property is kind of similar. If you multiply anything by 0, it turns into 0. Now I know you already know both of these, but you got to remember the names that go with them. Identity is anything times 1 stays the same, and 0 is anything times 0 turns into 0. It's time to answer a couple little questions, and then you can get started on your classwork.